Liberate IT is an Oracle NetSuite solution provider that has been servicing Australian and New Zealand companies since 2011.
Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome again to the latest in the Liberate IT webinar series. I'll be your host, Andrew Liniger. Today, we are talking about ZAB, and I am going to introduce the team of Zone & Co. We've got both Doug and Joe joining us. So just a bit about ZAB, or Zone Advanced Billing. ZAB allows you to manage your billing and revenue better, whether you have an existing complex revenue model or looking to introduce a subscription service to your offering. Zone Advanced Billing simplifies the complex and automates this process for you. So I am going to hand over to Doug. Doug has been in the ERP space now for the last 15 years, and in the previous 6 years has been working for NetSuite. So Doug, hello. I will hand over to you.
Hello, thanks, and nice to meet everybody virtually. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and you should be seeing now the existing NetSuite customers ZAB free trial. So I just want to throw this up. Essentially, I will put this information, the link for this free trial, into the chat. Also, how to get a hold of us in terms of my email information. So we'll refer back to this both at the end of the webinar as well. So just, a little bit about Joe and myself. I'll start with myself. So I am a regional sales director with ZAB, essentially is who I'm working with for Zone Advanced Billing. This is my particular focus at Zone & Company. I've been in the NetSuite space for about 6 years now. As Andrew mentioned, my role previously has always been a solution architect type of role. So I've worked primarily with software and services companies, both in North America and most recently in EMEA. So I was based in the Netherlands for part of my tenure at NetSuite, and as well as the West Coast of the United States. I also have worked a bit with ANZ customers, customers in NetSuite and JPAC. So I have a really good idea of how software services customers work throughout the different locations with NetSuite. And I worked a lot with Zone Advanced Billing and Zone & Company on the NetSuite side, and just saw a lot of very good return on investment with customers that we had in this advanced billing space. Also with me, who will be doing the demonstration today, is Joe Scavoto. And Joe, if you don't mind introducing yourself as well.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Joe Scavoto, the Senior Solution Consultant here at Zone. I've been with Zone about 2 years now, and prior to that, I was actually a solution consultant at NetSuite doing software and technology vertical within the Northeast. And then prior to that, I was actually in accounting finance, working at Deloitte and General Motors. So very nice to be with everyone today.
Great. And today what we're going to do is we're going to take you through a little bit of background on Zone, the company, information around that. We'll start talking about what Zone Advanced Billing is, the types of companies that we work with, some key differentiators in the way that the solution is architected. We'll provide a demonstration and a question and answer session as well. So as you have questions throughout the presentation, make sure to put them in the Q&A, and we'll have Andrew monitoring that, make sure that we can answer anything as we go along, but anything we can't get to today, we'll also make sure to follow up with. So without further ado, a little bit about Zone Company. So Zone & Company, essentially, our founders came from a security technology company that was leveraging NetSuite as their ERP. And they were very early employees of the company, had lots of connections throughout the telecom and software industries, and decided to then spin up Zone & Company as a NetSuite implementer and a NetSuite reseller similar to Liberate. So we still actually have that side of the business in the United States, where we will do NetSuite implementations and provide different customizations for clients of ours into NetSuite. But as our founders had a lot of these telecom software types of companies that they were working with, we saw a lot of billing requests in terms of customizations to NetSuite, and decided to then go ahead and productize the offering that we kept providing sort of over and over again in a bespoke, customized way. So That's good news, really, in terms of providing, good NetSuite expertise. When you work with Zone, you're not working with someone who just understands a piece in terms of NetSuite. We understand everything from the end-to-end solution. So we also understand not just the application that we've designed, but the different pieces of NetSuite, reports within NetSuite, order to cash, process, procure to pay, et cetera, et cetera. So what we're talking about today, Zone Advanced Billing, is built on the platform, so what they call built for NetSuite. It's based on information such as custom records, custom fields, if you're familiar with NetSuite, based on save searches. So really, there's not a lot of programming that's going into this, not a lot of scripting. It's mostly just built on the platform in a way that's a configurable manner. And essentially, what we're talking about here is Zone Advanced Billing being completely within NetSuite. So it's not a standalone application. It's not a third-party application. It lives within your NetSuite instance. Your users are acquainted with how NetSuite works, and that's how it's designed to work within this. So accessing information via a 360 manner in the customer record, for example, and pulling up subscriptions there, the navigation throughout it. And in terms of how the application ties into the different pieces here. So you will see different records when you install a ZAB bundle. But ultimately, what you're getting to is a native NetSuite invoice, native NetSuite revenue recognition, and so on and so forth. Outside of the system itself, we will see different connections to CRM, CPQ, Salesforce.com, for example. We will see connections to proprietary platforms for bringing in different elements of usage data or variable usage data, and we'll often see websites, Suite Commerce Advanced, different touch points, whether it might be an end user, a self-service component, feeding information into the changes regarding your contracts and subscriptions. These can be utilized using just the NetSuite standard API, but we also have built a REST-based API wrapper that you can leverage as well, just a little bit more of a modern way of working with putting in data into the system so that you're not doing lots of calls to NetSuite, et cetera. So a lot of options to pull data into the system as well. And of course, if you want to leverage CSV uploads and not have direct connections, that's an option as well. And any way you can build, we can too, as it says here. But essentially, looking at these different types of boxes, we've thought about not so much what industries that we work with. We work with lots of software companies. We work with lots of telecom companies. We do work with companies that have warehouse distribution requirements as well. So we're not verticalizing how we go to market and how the system is designed. It's just really, we will see these different ways in which we bill, and we'll build them into the product so that they're there as an option. And some of these will actually solve challenges that you have within NetSuite in general. So, for example, pooling of usage. So if we look at this particular box here, more or less when you're pooling usage, you're looking at a parent-child relationship where you have to roll up different usage from children up into a parent. Also, things like inventory fulfillment. So if you have subscriptions for products that need to be sent out, we can produce a native NetSuite sales order, which then can be fulfilled. Other things within here, such as data mediation. So the idea of us bringing usage into NetSuite and then being able to manipulate that usage to then go off and rate it and bill, right? So we wouldn't be expecting to consume raw usage data and just have that raw usage data be the basis for the billing. We can transform that data and we can make that meaningful for billing applications. Also fitting into that category would be something like attribute-based pricing, where attributes are going to change the way in which you're generating charges that'll be a basis for an invoice. And then just a lot of other things here, consolidated invoicing, for example, where we can actually take everything that's been prepared upfront from all of your subscriptions, prepare those charges, and then break them out into invoices before going to an invoice with NetSuite versus creating a PDF or something that have to be then reconciled to multiple invoices, payments within the system. So we just worked with a lot of customers that have a lot of ways in which they bill. We've built this into the system, and more or less you can be able to leverage all of these different existing ways in which you bill, but more importantly for future proofing and scalability, to be able to say, well, tomorrow we might be not doing any prepaid usage. in our model today, but can easily pivot to doing something like that because it is actually available in Zap. So why do companies choose Zone? A couple of value propositions and sort of the recurring themes that we hear. So don't expect you to read this entire slide, but want to call out a couple of different examples of what we would see. EverCommerce, for example, they buy software companies frequently, and each of these software companies is going to bill differently. And the idea is not to change the way in which these companies bill, but to be able to, as they bring on and onboard new companies, build that into NetSuite, utilize Zone Advanced Billing to be able to fit that particular billing model. So sort of that unicorn model where you're going to have a different billing cadence, different billing method for each type of company. Databricks, big name in data analytics, AI, machine learning, et cetera. They were really interested in looking at Zone Advanced Billing because of the platform, right? They wanted to get as much as possible onto NetSuite. And instead of using a best-in-breed approach or a approach where you're going to have a lot of different connections with many different systems, they wanted to get as much as possible onto to NetSuite and bill within the ERP. Split It, they are a card-based installment solution. So really for them, it's about attribute-based preparation of data and data transformation, not a simple exercise for what they were doing before. So we send in the data from another system scenario that's transformed with going through our layer of data, and we'll be able to then put it into a meaningful way. So that was really the good value for them. And finally, Vertifone is an insurance management software. And what their sort of criteria for getting into a billing solution was something that they could use without having to relearn a brand new application, something that's intuitive. And we get a lot of feedback about the way it's architected in Zone Advanced Billing into being extremely usable for the end user in a configurable way. A few more logos up here. Point being here that we work with a myriad of companies. We work with very large private, very large public companies, smaller private companies, smaller public companies in multiple industries and have many different use cases. For example, working here with Avalara, tax software, public, 500 million in revenue, but also to call out, Allen, who is providing air filters, about 8 million in revenue for them. But have a subscription in which you buy an air filtration system, and those filters will then come into your queue for once a quarter or something of that manner. In addition to that, we have been working with Liberate and working with Liberate customers. We have a few here just to call out. So NetSuite, who does VoIP for franchises, recently had brought on Zone Advanced Billing via Liberate, and Devoli as well. We work essentially with network automation tools onboarded from Liberate as well. Now, to set up a little bit about what we're going to be talking about today, essentially is, we'll talk a little bit about the problem and the solution. So as this slide builds, I'm sure you can imagine this being in your system today. If you're maintaining multiple systems, what the result is. So you'll have information coming from a CRM, CPQ, that feeds a third-party billing system. That third-party billing system has linkages into your usage data. That'll prepare an order. You'll do all of your mediation, all of your rating within this third-party billing system. That prepares an invoice. And then that invoice has to be then duplicated in NetSuite. There's a duplicate record that has to be maintained, duplicate payments, et cetera, to have to be reconciled back into the third-party billing system. As well, this third-party billing system might have a component of revenue recognition, where you're going to be managing all of that. Perhaps it has to be managed on a spreadsheet, but if you're utilizing advanced revenue management, revenue recognition within NetSuite, you'll have to then reconcile that with that as well. And then you'll have a duplicate journal entry unlinked to the invoice at the end of the day. And as well, if you're doing any fulfillment for inventory, that has to be a completely separate exercise. So just a really, it's a hairball scenario that we see most often with clients that we start working with. And really what we're aiming to do, and what Joe is going to start presenting about in terms of the demonstration, is getting all of this within NetSuite post CRM or CPQ, or within NetSuite if you are utilizing NetSuite CRM. So the idea is to have the contract within Zone Advanced Billing, have all of your rules set up in terms of how the data will be mediated and then rated have a proprietary system or any system that you're using, bringing in usage data into Zone to do that exercise, and then billing and fulfilling, going down into AR and cash collections, now starting to get more into native NetSuite transactions, revenue recognition within NetSuite, and of course, closing the circle with the renewals to then start a new contract or to keep it going if it is an evergreen type of situation. And again, all of this brought together through NetSuite financial reporting, utilizing NetSuite transactions, utilizing NetSuite master data, customer records, item masters, et cetera. So idea being break down that hairball and bring it into one system. And your best in breed may be more of a CRM approach, bring that all of it rest into NetSuite. So that being said, I'm going to pass it over to Joe now to start setting up the demonstration. And let's see. Okay, Joe's got it. Thank you, Joe.
All right. So what I wanted to do is kind of first start us off as the records and kind of lay down the overall architecture of Zone Advanced Billing, some of the information that's really going to be coming into the ERP. Like Doug ultimately said, right, we're going to be solving for those challenges by having this all within one single platform, right? So we start off on a record from the subscription. So as you see, we might be directly linking with Salesforce or even Salesforce CPQ or any other kind of point CRM systems out there. But the subscription record is the first record that's creating inside of NetSuite. Think of the subscription as ultimately the contract in place. It doesn't actually have to be a subscription that you're ultimately selling. It could be a mixture of, as you can see, a fixed recurring, one-time, or usage. But we can also have various hardware items. Doug mentioned that company Allen, who's doing recurring shipments of a filter like every 6 or 9 months based upon the type of filter that we need to be sending out. The subscription is made up of various different items. Each one of those items can have its own unique billing schedule, which we'll kind of talk about a little bit more. So you might have one that's set up as a quarterly, upfront, or even billing in arrears, all living within a single contract. Now, underneath the subscription, we have this concept called charges. And these charges, think of that, these are ultimately going to be line items on the sales order or the invoice, but we can generate these charges in advance, get future cash flow analysis to see, okay, when am I going to be billing? How am I going to be collecting? How am I doing from a cash flow perspective? Now, from a usage perspective, this is where Doug was referencing being able to bring in some of that variable information. So as you can see, we have this linkage ultimately to some third-party data platform, right, or maybe a proprietary system that we need to track usage. Usage could be anything such as charging for minutes or text or SMS on a period basis, right? This could be gigabytes used on an individual month, right? Any type of way where you have some sort of variable component that we need to charge against, we need to source in that data. And when we bring that information in the system, right, we can ultimately generate those charges as well. But what do we do with those charges once they're ultimately set up? The charges then, as I said, can be line items on the invoice or the sales order transaction inside of NetSuite. Zone Advanced Billing, the subscription, right, can be automatically created directly from Salesforce with all of the correct items that we're ultimately selling here. Generate our charges, automatically link into your platform to track the variable usage or variable component here, and then ultimately generate that sales transaction, in this case either a sales order or an invoice type of transaction. So ultimately, that was from the billing side. So when I look at this from a billing perspective, right, we created our subscription, ultimately generated our invoice. But at the same time, Zone Advanced Billing is also talking directly to the NetSuite revenue arrangement. Right? So this allows us to capture total contract value, recognizing this directly off of the subscription as opposed to the sales order, which gives us a lot of flexibility to bring in that usage information, to have any upsells or downsell activity, all driven from the subscription record, right, inside of NetSuite. Now, also within Zone Advanced Billing, we have some various concepts called a rate plan search map. And we're going to dig into a lot more of this, but think of the rate plan search map as a way to interpret data, right? As a way to read your data from a variable or consumption-based model to be able to calculate how much do I need to bill, right? And a good example that we're going to be walking through is peak versus off-peak billing. What happens if they're separate rates? We'll walk through that in just a bit. Additionally, we have a concept called a billing profile. Now, a billing profile allows us to set criteria. How do I want that invoice presented? Now, we'll see some examples in just a bit, but high level, what happens if you have a contract, kind of like the subscription is outlining over here, where you have fixed recurring hardware or services fees on there? What if the client says, I can never have my hardware or my services fee revenue be on the same invoice as my fixed recurring? That's the client's requirements. We want to set that up, but the contract still needs to be set up as one single subscription in this case. The billing profile lets us automatically combine or separate into separate invoices. Additionally, we have a concept called revenue configuration. So all of those charges that we talked about in our previous, how do we want to define, how do we create the revenue elements? Right? So we can actually predefine how do I want to group and combine to ultimately, do I want to create one single revenue element for every one of these? Or do I want to group? Or maybe I want to split, create multiple revenue elements from a single subscription item, for example. We also have renewal rules directly living within our platform, right? So what type of renewal policies do we want to apply? Are we talking about applying a CPI uplift, right? We have a direct link to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, right? Do we want to do an auto renewal or have a customer be on an evergreen basis, right? And that's the concept where you pay every single month. There's no kind of hard set contract, but it just repeats every single month in perpetuity until you call, right? That's the evergreen. We have a lot of customers who also might have an auto renew. Right? If they haven't canceled within 30 days of their subscription or contract being ended, right, we just continue it forward one more month. So these different rules, right, allows us to set policies, right? And we can have different one of these for different types of customers. Enterprise might have different policies and rules in place, right? But it allows us to have this information be populated in the system, have the system calculate what needs to happen and when. Now, to dig deeper into data mediation, kind of explain a little bit of what that actually is. Think of this as opposed to taking information out of your proprietary system and doing any offline calculations to ultimately calculate billing. Let's leave that up to Zone in our billing system to ultimately calculate. There's different types of calculations that might need to take into consideration, right? You might have a basic calculation converting from megabytes to gigabytes. You might have a conversion. A different type of conversion, as well as pooling. So Doug mentioned this concept of pooling before, right? What happens if you have 3 subscriptions across a reseller relationship? You need to get the total aggregate of usage. Additionally, you might have attribute-based, right? So this could be time, right? Maybe this is peak versus off-peak. Charge a different rate for a text message that got sent after 9 p.m. than you did that got sent before 9 p.m. As well as demand or type of transactions. So we've seen customers in the telecom space that have different rates based upon, okay, what was my direction of the call? Was it an inbound call versus an outbound call? Was it sent from, New Zealand to Australia or Australia to New Zealand? So understanding the direction of calls as well as the locations of ultimately calls. And then lastly, we have some sort of event-based milestones. You provide us with percentages or even triggers, right, to allow us to then ultimately bill based upon that. Additionally, we're flexible enough to actually have additional models and develop those with you, right, all living within the system. And this is, again, no coding or anything to be able to support that. Now, each one of those formula-based models might have some sort of tier involved, right? So you can see you might have cumulative usage based upon some sort of tiering or price book, right? The system is going to be able to handle those calculations. Now look at our attributes. We have our on and off peak example, right? So we have different rates for different times of the day, right? So we can define what time of day means off peak, and the system does that heavy lifting, right? Under the old model of having to do that in Excel, right? You really run that risk of missing some of that off-peak or on-peak pricing, right? Because that had the risk of doing that offline in Excel. And then we might have some sort of event base as well. So maybe it's milestone, right? Where we're going to be 20% on signature, right? So more of an event or trigger base. All right. So really kind of take another level deeper into data mediation. What I wanted to do is actually call out this table for just a second here, right? So inside of here, we have a typical kind of usage table that we want to look at. So you can see here we have information such as external ID, customer, but then we have information such as attribute. We have attribute 1 and attribute 2. I just want to focus on attribute 2 for just a second. Think of attribute 2 as ultimately the time of day, right? So in this case, we have 1630, 1400, right? So what time of day did an individual event occur? Now, we can define our formulas. Sorry, I skipped ahead. We can define our formulas to say if this actually occurs after 6 p.m., 1600, ultimately, I want to return a value of 1. Within our search map, we can then define when you just have a value of 1, I actually want to charge $20. So the system is now calculating, is this after 1600, right? On peak or off peak? And if that is the case, what do I want to charge for that? Right? Am I charging a flat $20 in this case for that individual instance? Again, to talk a little bit more about kind of presentation of this information, right? You see our individual subscription with multiple different charges, right? We have a subscription with a fixed recurring line items. Maybe you're tracking users in this case, but we also have some sort of API matrix, right? Where we have different activities such as get or post or delete, different types of API calls that we have different rates for. Now, ultimately, how do I want that information displayed on the invoice? So as you can see, you might have your January charges coming through, typically how you would see them on an invoice, right? But how do you actually want that information displayed, right? This is more the traditional way of ultimately displaying that information. Now, within that billing profile that we kind of talked about before, you might be able to define within a subscription, actually, the API matrix is actually with a separate customer altogether. Maybe it's a sub-customer relationship, or we need to split out that API information to be on a separate standalone information. Again, via the billing profile, we might actually want to have certain subtotaling information defined directly within a configurable tool called our billing profile to display information that's more readily needed for your customers, right? So some customers, they don't want to see this lengthy invoice. They want it maybe grouped in subtotal. Think of resellers, for example. How do they want to see that invoice, right? They might have a number of different end users, but they want that information grouped and subtotaled by that end user. And it's just making this information that's living in the system more presentable to our customers, right, which makes ultimately cash flow come in if they don't have questions on the invoice. Now, in this example, we have a subscription in our API information, just like we had in our previous. Now, in our billing profile, right, we have our information ultimately displayed for here. What happens if this was 2 separate subscriptions? We have the ability to consolidate before the invoice even gets created. So upstream of the system, we can actually consolidate that information. But look what happened. Notice that there's 2 separate charge lines for fixed recurring. This is leveraging a combined functionality inside of the billing profile. Instead of displaying the 2 lines for fixed recurring, maybe I wanted to combine that information into 1 line to the customer. Again, the flexibility on this, billing profiles can be customer specific, right? So for your one enterprise customer, they just need it done this way, but this can also be shared across customers as well. So you have different types of options, right? Most granular, customer specific, or you can even share them. All right, so let me now actually hop into NetSuite here so we can actually get a feel of what the system ultimately looks like. So I'm taking it to NetSuite. What I first want to do is start off on the customer record. So within the customer record, right, just like the rest of NetSuite, everything is going to be drillable for us. So I have a telco style example that I wanted to walk us through. So now within the customer master, we will see an additional tab called the ZAP subscription. That is just going to house all of our contracts in place with our customers, right? So as you can see, we have our ZAP subscriptions. In drilling into this, right, we have our various contracts, right? So you might have a number of different contracts all living within the system. But drilling into our telco example here, as you can see, we have a 1-year contract in place, and I have a charge schedule set to annually. Now think of the charge schedule as setting the billing cadence for a particular product in this case. Right, so we're setting it at the contract level. How do I want to build the overall contract? We have the flexibility to define the charge schedule at the very individual line items that we're ultimately selling. So we have 3 line items here, all with 3 different charge schedules or charge cadences for this particular offering. Additionally, our contracts are meant to be fluid in nature. We know that there's going to be upsells. So at any point during the contract, you can add brand new subscription items right into the application. Those upsells can be driven through a CRM integration, right? Or we can actually manually create them directly within the NetSuite application. Right, so they might have different start dates. What happens with the proration? How do we handle those? We prorate those entirely within the system, so you don't have to do any of those offline calculations. But when I look at this particular product here, you can see I have fixed recurring, usage, and even one-time all living within a single subscription. This could have been a hardware individual item, but in this case, we have a phone plan. So let's actually first drill into this. So I'm now taking it into what's called a subscription item. The subscription item is specific to the actual subscription itself. This gives us customer level pricing. So we've seen customers who might have 500 different contracts, all with 500 different pricing. We've also seen customers with, high volume of customers that have standardized pricing. So the subscription item gives us flexibility to have very granular customer-specific pricing, as well as maybe higher level, customers who are on typical price plans, for example. But the subscription item, just to call out a couple things here, is inherently linked to the NetSuite Item Master. So this little link here is actually would take us to the NetSuite Item Master inside of NetSuite. So what is our revenue recognition rule? What is our GL treatment? All of that is living at the NetSuite Item Master here, right? Don't need to duplicate that like you would with a third-party point billing solution. All of that is living in here. And that is really helping solve those problems that Doug was talking about, the integration, the duplication of records, and the risk of linking and integrating that information. But coming back to our subscription item, ultimately, how am I selling this item? Right, so this phone plan is going to be kind of recurring in nature. So we're going to define our rate type as ultimately the way that we're selling. When I look at my rate types, right, we have fixed recurring, usage, right, that's going to be the variable component, right, looking at a consumption-based model, as well as one-time. We also support customers who have a prepaid model. Maybe a customer wants to prepay for a number of minutes on a monthly basis or a quarterly basis. Additionally, we may have a concept called fixed recurring plus usage, and that's really a hybrid scenario. Customers will charge a fixed recurring fee that might give them a certain quantity of data, for example. I know my phone plan, I get 2 gigs of data every single month. That's included in my overall price. So that's leveraging the hybrid example. Coming to our subscription item here, right, as you can scroll on down and see we're charging $500 per month, and I'm defining what my billing cadence is. So in this case, I'm billing on a quarterly charges. And notice that it says anniversary. So we support both calendar as well as anniversary-based billing. So if you have a customer who's signed up on 1/17/2021, you want to bill them on a quarterly calendar basis, or do you actually want the calendar actually start on the 17th of January, for example? Right, so we can actually define those rules. But once we define our charge schedules, we can then ultimately see our charges. So again, charges represent the line items on the invoice. I'm looking down into my charges, you can see I have 4 charges. as well as the total amount. So the system calculated how much is going to be taken into consideration. I forgot to call out, I did apply a 5% discount, so that's why you see kind of this discount field also. We also support amount-based discounts. So maybe you wanted to give $37 off and you didn't want to do a percent base, we do support. But really important, we have this drillability, and we'll talk a little bit more about this link, but we're directly created that invoice transaction. That's really fixed recurring. There's a number of different other scenarios from a fixed recurring basis, but high level, just wanted to cover those bases for now. Now coming back to our subscription, let's now take a look at the usage component, right? Maybe I want to track data, for example. So in this case, I want to charge $15 for every single gig of data that we ultimately consume, right? So the system needs to calculate when I bring in that usage or the number of data that comes in every month, I now want the system to calculate what that needs to be. Now, this is just a flat-based scenario, but we also support tiers-based as well, like we talked about before. Now, within our usage-based information, this is now where we actually add that usage into the system, right? So Doug talked about ways of getting that usage into the system, right? We can do CSV, leveraging NetSuite's import tool, but we can also do this via API. So some of our higher volume customers really want to set this up at an automated basis to get this information in more as a systematic way, right, to really automate this portion of the business. And we've seen a lot of customers really have a lot of time-consuming activities with reconciling this information, calculating offline, and then inherently getting this into their ERP as well. And just to call out a couple other things within the subscription item, really specific to usage, is some customers have this concept called the minimum charge. When we take a look at our charges, for example, we brought in that quantity of 20. Instead of actually defined a charge, for example, maybe $450. Now, what happens if the customer didn't actually hit that $450? The system would actually calculate a true-up charge for that individual period. Right, so we have that capabilities to do that. Now coming back to our subscription here, right? We have our subscription items all set up. Just wanted to call out a few more things. First is the revenue. So this is where we directly link to the NetSuite revenue elements and the revenue arrangements. So you can see the 3 individual revenue elements outlined for us here. Also linked directly to the NetSuite Invoice. Right, so this is Zone is creating that native NetSuite transaction, in this case, the invoice record. Like everything we walked through before, it's all drillable. So I can get into my invoice transaction, right, our GL posting event in this case. So here we are kind of taken into this. Right, in this case, we just have their 2 line items for the fixed recurring phone plan, as well as the setup fee as well. All right, so that concludes my portion of the demonstration for today. What I'll do is I'll kick this back over to Doug before we give it back to Andrew here.
Thanks, Joe. And yeah, as mentioned, looking up on Joe's screen here, so for existing NetSuite customers, we are offering a free trial, and I provided the link in the chat. Also, we'll be providing this recording, I believe, as well, Andrew, and put my contact information on here. But essentially what we can do is, if you contact us through this link for the free trial, reach back out to you, set up an idea of what a free trial would look like, be able to provision the actual Zone Advanced Billing bundle into your NetSuite account, preferably in the sandbox of the account, and get you to start playing around with the transactions and see how it might work for your unique use cases with guidance from us, of course.
Brilliant.
But thanks to everyone for the time.
Thanks so much. We got a couple of questions through. If I could throw to probably the first one to Joe. and that is, if I pull the usage from a system, can it be reviewed before being pushed for billing?
Yeah, absolutely. So within the, when we bring in usage, we can actually calculate those charges. The charges are actually sitting in like a pending billing status, so we can actually put the, workflow on that itself, right? Or we can actually put a reviewer stage in to make sure everything did get calculated first. So just because we calculate the charges, we go through a formal event of creating the transaction before we actually create that invoice. Does that answer your question, Mark?
He can't say yes or no. Oh, yes, he can. Yeah. So yes, he was happy with that. Great stuff. I've got a question for Doug, and that is, what's your pricing model?
Yeah, good question. Essentially, our pricing model is very fluid. We work with, as I said before, customers of all sizes with different requirements. There's a lot to the ZAB product. Perhaps you're utilizing revenue recognition elements, perhaps you're not, right? So typically what we do to get to pricing and to get to initial pricing is when we start working with you, we'll do a discovery session, understand what your data volume requirements are, understand what your different use cases might be, et cetera. And then based upon what you're going to be, what you're going to be using within the system, then we can provide initial pricing. We do it this way because a lot of our competitors and a lot of people in the market tend to do things based on revenue, right? So if you're working with, a particular model where, people might work with volume of transactions. In this industry, it tends to be volume of revenue. And we don't want to relegate you to say, if you've done very well utilizing NetSuite, utilizing Zone Advanced Billing for whatever you're doing, your secret sauce in your company, to then turn around and say, well, we're gonna then charge you more because you're making more money. So that's not the way in which we do it. We will figure out a pricing model that works based on your requirements.
Great, thanks. So fantastic. I've got a question from Sam. And that is, and we might need to ask Sam a quick question on that, but does the system handle bank integrations and cash application?
Yeah, the system actually, go ahead, Joe.
Go ahead, Doug. Fine.
Yeah, no, the bank integrations, essentially cash application is on the NetSuite side. There are things that we can do in terms of enhancing that. I know there's some deficiencies in terms of the cash application sometimes within NetSuite. So our professional services team can sometimes work to enhance that process. But the bank integrations process itself, the reconciliation processes, et cetera, that's native NetSuite.
Sam, did that answer your question? Great. Awesome.
Yeah, yes, thanks. Okay.
Okay, I guess some standouts for me as I've previously had to work with billing arrangements is that whole, you can avoid that manipulation of data, of that raw data, before you go and apply your rules to it, right? You can get NetSuite to suck in the data and calculate the rules, which is really nice. I prefer that. That just removes potential for error and adding another 1,000 Excel spreadsheets, right, to your business process. I got another question from Mark come through, which is great. Can customers view the details usage via a portal? Might be rolled up and not visible on the invoice. Oh yeah. So if you're wanting to consolidate, and simplify your invoice, but allow your users to log in to, say, the NetSuite Customer Center to view the details or the breakdown of those calculations, is that something you can do?
Yeah, we can push the information to like a third-party portal as well. Additionally, within Zone Advanced Billing, we do have the ability to attach the usage record. So we have a lot of customers who, we talked about some of our telecom customers, we have a lot of call data records in the system, right? But obviously the invoice would be too long. So we have the ability to do a PDF or a CSV attachment that we can actually provide along with the invoice that we're ultimately sending as well.
Great. Mark's happy with that. Fantastic. Okay. Another question, are you working with Australian or UK telcos, as there are various onerous regulatory requirements with those? I don't know what they are, but
I'm trying to think offhand. I would have to kind of look up where all of our telcos are located. But we can take that up as a follow-up. And Andrew, if you want to get the information, we can give you some more detailed responses to that.
Okay, another question from Mark. Can you tell me a bit more about the Salesforce integration? Joe, I can see your mouth.
Yeah, I think you're on mute, Joe. Yeah.
Yep. Sorry. I guess the nice benefit of being on video, you can see my mouth moving. So, yeah, ultimately, into your follow-up, what gets passed over, it's really contingent on what's set up in your environment, right? So we've seen a lot of customers move over to CPQ, for example. So and depending on how their CPQ is set up, right, we might be talking to the contract record or the asset record to pull in information, depending on how those the system is ultimately configured. Right, so we are flexible on where we pull information from Salesforce or Salesforce CPQ, right? Because we know customers are going to have their own custom fields that we need to get information from to be able to calculate their billing, especially with CPQ, right? Because there's so many variables that go into that that we need to come up with. But standard information, right, is going to be mapped in the traditional opportunity to order inside of Salesforce, right? That's at standard Salesforce, that we're going to get the main information from there.
Okay, so there's a mapping exercise that goes with that integration.
Yep, absolutely. Yep.
But I'm right in saying that if our customers don't have a Salesforce.com within their business, they don't need this for Zab, right?
That's correct. You can create subscriptions directly within NetSuite. You can also do import them into the system, or if you have another third-party CRM, you can also use that as well.
Great.
Or if you're leveraging NetSuite CRM, you can do that.
Yeah, cool. While I wait for more questions, another standout for me as I watched this today was the flexibility around presenting invoices to customers, right? Regardless of how they're subscribing to you. Traditionally, it's always felt a bit locked in that way, and just having that flexibility to be able to say, okay, well, I'm going to present it to you just the way that you're asking me to, and not having to do that somehow manually is quite a great feature, guys.
Yeah, and I think the important thing to note there too is that's pre-invoicing. A lot of that in native NetSuite gets solved in post-invoice, which is really just cobbling together invoices onto a PDF, which still remain unique invoices. So that this is pre-invoice.
Great. Oh, okay. Cool. And also that subscription visibility in the customer record. I mean, for someone that works with customers every day, and I need to know what they've purchased, even from NetSuite rather than us. That's really helpful to be able to see exactly what their subscriptions are at any given time. Okay, so I don't have any more questions through. So thanks very much, guys. I really appreciate you presenting that today. I'm just going to quickly still the screen back, and I'll quickly wrap up. So I'm always interested in any further training suggestions, whether it's NetSuite specific or suite apps or third-party solutions like we saw from Zab today. We really like to present those to our customers, inform and educate around that. Talking of which, next month we're going to be presenting the Focus software, which is a BI tool, but they've got a specific budgeting and forecasting solution that really complements NetSuite and has a tight integration to that. So, but that is separate to and outside of NetSuite. And if you're looking for a HR solution coming up, also as we're going to be joined by the Elmo team and have them present to us. So the recording today will go to our YouTube page. Look, I will share your email addresses with Doug so that he can follow up any of those questions that you may have had and answer any questions that you might think of after we wrap up today. But look, thank you very much, everyone, for joining us, and take care, and see you shortly. Bye-bye for now.
We hope this video gave you the information you were after. If you have any further questions, get in touch with us using the links in the description. At Liberate IT, we can provide free consulting to understand your business system requirements, understand your company growth plans, and provide free NetSuite demonstrations. For more information, visit our website.